Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us here at KAKM for Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. On the satellite imagery yesterday, we had moisture sliding northward here, catching the southeast coast a little bit there, but the whole thing gradually moving eastward. Otherwise, just some scattered showers up to the north and a little more numerous showers here across the North Gulf Coast, some of those into Prince William Sound, south central Alaska. Otherwise, mostly cloudy over the interior to mostly clear and cold up over the North Slope, and a lot of clouds and kind of snow showery out there over the Bering Sea on down into the western Aleutians, but pretty good break here over the eastern Aleutians as well as from the Yukon Delta down across Kodiak Island. Well, today we had a trough come northward, brought snow showers in across south central Alaska earlier today, and rain and snow showers along the North Gulf Coast. That all shifting up to the north. A little bit of light snow into the Tanana Valley area today as well. Kind of a breakthrough here, and that other band of snow dropped about 1 to 2 inches up here over the northwest areas. Also, Nome picked up a couple inches of snow today. They've got 14 on the ground now, and comparing that to about 17 inches up at Kotzebue of measured snowfall depths this afternoon. Otherwise, again, clear and cold up over the North Slope. The Arctic coast, areas of low clouds and fog, temperatures below zero there. Winds kind of gusty up here over the northwest interior. Out of the east and northeast, gusting as high as 45 miles per hour in some locations there, but not much lighter down through the Bering Strait into St. Lawrence Island. And still a weak low out here over the Bering Sea, so there's scattered snow showers all through this area, widely scattered down across the Aleutians, and some breaks here across Kodiak Island, and showers decreasing throughout the day here across the southeast coast, and some breaks showing up there throughout the afternoon across most areas, especially to the west. And this is the next system down here to the south, and that'll be moving northward quite rapidly, spreading rain and wind into the southern panhandle later tonight, and staying dry to the north there, but an increase in the clouds. Also, winds increasing across the Gulf of Alaska, excuse me, to Kodiak Island. And scattered snow showers continue here over south central Alaska and the North Gulf Coast, mostly along and west of the Alaska Range, and still a chance of some flurries possibly into the mid-Tanana Valley. Otherwise, mostly dry up across the northeast interior, Brooks Range, North Slope. Variably cloudy there, patchy fog in the Arctic coast. Snow diminishing along with the winds up here over the northwest interior, but still periods of light snow or flurries occurring from the west central interior out across the Seward Peninsula. Back down across St. Lawrence Island, scattered snow showers for the Yukon Delta. No change out here in the west. Trough will spread some snow showers into the western Aleutians, but should be dry here for the Fox Islands, dry there for the Alaska Peninsula. Starting to see those northeast winds pick up there on the Pacific side of the peninsula, as I mentioned, back toward Kodiak Island. With the rain, just a chance late tonight, so you'll see an increase in the winds first, and then the rain moving in later on after that. And for tomorrow, rain and snow across Kodiak Island, right up to the southern coast of the Seward Peninsula, but should be mostly clear here from northern Cook Inlet back up into the east central interior areas, and you pick up some more clouds here from the Koyukuk Valley back to the west, and there's still some lingering snow showers going on tomorrow on the southern coast of the Seward Peninsula. Prairie's light snow up over the northwest interior, mostly the Noatak Valley back toward Point Hope and Cape Lisburne, and some gusty east winds. Otherwise, not too bad a day, or not much in the way of any changes occurring up there over the eastern Arctic coast, and some clouds again up over the northeast interior. This front pushes through quite rapidly, so the heaviest precipitation will occur late tonight, tomorrow morning, with that changing back to showers during the afternoon, but rain and snow up over the northern panhandle back across Yakutat to about the Cordova area, and then just clouds into Prince William Sound and those areas, and back out to the west, another pretty intense storm. That's 947 millibars on the central pressure there. That precipitation probably not quite reaching the western Aleutians, but generally you'll see an increase in the winds out in that area. And then for Monday, that whole system tracks eastward here, staying to the south, but close enough to keep some gale warnings in over the central Aleutian areas, and there'll be a chance of rain from Nikolsky all the way out, changing over to snow towards Shemya. Up to the north there, pretty much easterly flow here and some scattered snow showers embedded in that flow, but nothing very significant, just a chance for the Pribilofs. Dry conditions, partly to mostly cloudy skies here over the northern Bering Sea and along the southeast coast, and some easterly winds at 10 to 20 miles per hour, maybe gusting as high as 25, maybe 30 miles per hour. But this low center here weakening, pulling northeastward as this one heads to the east, pulling northwestward into Bristol Bay and weakening quite a bit down to 984 millibars. So still enough gradient here to keep some gale force winds in across Kodiak Island, and snow levels low enough for rain and snow along these areas up along the North Gulf Coast there, and then extending on to the east. And then another system develops on that frontal boundary, and that brings another good shot of moisture into the panhandle during the day on Monday, and snow levels rising with that. So generally rain falling across that area, a little more intermittent up to the north, and then the remains of that moisture with the front that comes up tomorrow and tomorrow night brings some snow mostly along the western and southern slopes of the western and central Alaska range there. Should be mostly dry over the Copper River Basin, probably see some snow down around the Wrangell Mountain areas, and then a little bit of moisture may slip on up into the upper Tanana Valley, but that will be quite light, mostly of the flurry variety. Otherwise, fair and dry here over the north central interior, north slope, and even the Arctic coast. Not much change, still carrying some brisk wind advisories along the eastern Arctic coast on Monday with some patchy areas of fog. And looking at temperatures across the southeast coast this afternoon, upper 30s to lower 40s, 40 degrees at Sitka. This afternoon they picked up about 1/4 of an inch of rain today, 38 in Juneau, 43 at Klawock, and the warm spot in the state was at Metlakatla with 46. Mid-30s along the North Gulf Coast, 34 in Valdez, 32 at Kenai, 37 at Homer and at Kodiak, Akiak up to 40. Copper River Basin, Gulkana at 11, -1 at Northway, and 6 above at Fairbanks, but Healy had 34. 3 degrees up at Fort Yukon. That same temperature matched also over at Bettles. And then much colder here north of the mountains. That's Umiat Airfield at -40. And they came up from a low in the last 24 hours of 48 degrees below zero. Minus teens here up along the Arctic coast, but Kaktovik a little warmer at 6 below. Cape Lisburne -7. Teens over the northwest interior areas as well as the Kobuk Valley with Ambler at 14. And upper 20s here along the southern coast of the Seward Peninsula with 10 degrees both out at Gamble and up at Tin City, while Savunga had 9. 12 degrees in McGrath, and then with some snow today, 33 up down at Bethel, otherwise in the 20s there across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. And out to the west in the Bering Sea, the Pribilofs mid to upper 30s this afternoon, just 27 out at Shemya to 32 at Adak, and then rising into the upper 30s here across the eastern Aleutians, upper 30s, lower 40s there, Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula. And for the lows tonight, 30s there for Kodiak Island, 20s Bristol Bay, 30s also for the Alaska Peninsula, upper 20s out over the Aleutians, and generally teens and 20s all the way up to the Seward Peninsula, colder over the Copper River Basin and the upper Yukon Valley, with the coldest temperatures again up over the North Slope areas out to the Arctic coast, 30s for the southeast coast. Highs for tomorrow, once again, just like today, 30s and mid 40s there for the Panhandle. Lower to mid 30s for Bristol Bay, 20s all the way up again to the Seward Peninsula, and 0 to 10 above for the Tanana Valley, and then dropping back below 0 there toward Arctic Village and across the North Slope. 30s to lower 40s for the peninsula and mostly in the 30s for the Aleutians. And for flying weather, again, that area of IFR will be shifting late tonight into the southern southeast coast, and by tomorrow afternoon will be mostly along the eastern border there, with conditions breaking out to VFR here across Dixon Entrance, Prince of Wales Island. Marginal VFR up along the North Gulf Coast in towards southern Prince William Sound, back across Shelikof Strait with the IFR here east side of Kodiak Island on out into the Gulf of Alaska. Then a swath of VFR here from Bristol Bay northeastward there up into the interior, and then some more IFR here from the northwest coast on down to St. Lawrence Island, and really just areas of marginal VFR down to the Pribilofs. The Bering Sea seeing some VFR conditions here, especially over the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, and the lowest conditions will stay just to the south here of the western Aleutians. As far as passes go, Anaktuvik and Adigan will see VFR for both those passes tomorrow, and for Sunday, Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR. Same forecast for Rainy, Windy, Isabel, and Mentasta, all looking VFR, or will be VFR through tomorrow. And Tanita, same forecast. Portage starting out marginal there with some lingering moisture, especially on the eastern entrance, then becoming VFR. Chilkoot and White deteriorating down to marginal VF or to IFR in the afternoon. And for the freezing levels, lifting north of the Pribilofs for tomorrow, right across northern Bristol Bay, up along the coast and off to the southeast, and some much milder air here near Dixon Entrance into the south. Otherwise, right around 2,000 feet over the central and southern southeast coast. This milder condition down here will shift up to the north on Monday. And then for icing tomorrow, between about 2,000 to 12,000 feet here, diminishing during the afternoon across the southeast coast, extending back across the Gulf of Alaska to the Kenai Peninsula, Kodiak Island area, and some icing up here to the north below about 7,000 feet from the northwest interior down through the Bering Strait. Otherwise, we have some just barely reaching the western Aleutians late tomorrow afternoon. Winds aloft, there's that upper low associated with the next system that's mostly going to stay to the south of the Aleutians and then slide eastward. So a weak flow here coming around across the Bering Sea, 35 to 70 knots. A stronger flow here south to north up to 150 knots into the Panhandle. 9,000 foot winds showing easterlies 45 to 55 knots here across the western Gulf of Alaska and Kodiak Island. Pretty light over the interior, mostly out of the east, then picking back up in speed along the Arctic coast. Southeasterlies 20 to 25 across the Panhandle, and pretty light there out over the Aleutians. The stronger winds staying to the south of the area there and then pulling off to the east tomorrow night and into Monday, with 50 knot easterlies otherwise tomorrow there into Kodiak Island, about 40 knots across the Gulf of Alaska. Then they really drop off right along the North Gulf Coast and into the southern interior, just 5 to 15 knot winds all the way up to the Brooks Range, again increasing a little bit there along the Arctic coast. Turbulence-wise, occasional moderate chop coming up to Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, and just reaching the southern Kenai Peninsula areas. Pretty smooth flying through the interior tomorrow. Maybe some light to isolated moderate chop, central and eastern Arctic coast. The Panhandle looks smooth. Much of the Bering Sea smooth, as well as the Aleutians, and beginning to catch the effects of that storm to the south there over the western areas late tomorrow afternoon. And after the break, I'll be back with a look at the marine forecasts.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. As you well know, you can get forecast information for any day of the week. Today, tonight, tomorrow, out to 6 or 7 days. It includes the high and low temperature, the wind direction, the chance of rain or snow in your part of Alaska. But did you know that there is information available to forecast out to 2 weeks? So the question is, how would you use that information? And here to answer that question today and tell us a lot more about climate services from the U.S. National Weather Service Alaska region is Rick Toman. He's the program manager for the Climate Science and Services. And Rick, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
How would we use information that is out to 2 weeks instead of just the high and low and the chance of rain?
Well, Dave, as we move out in time, of course, forecasts become more uncertain. So as we move into that second week from now, we're not looking at specific highs or lows or precipitation amounts at any given place. What we can do with the state of the science at this point is get a handle on patterns. So we can say things like increased chances for stormy weather in the Bering Sea in 2 weeks, or we've been in a cold weather pattern, looks like 8 to 10 days from now, that pattern's going to change. Those are the kind of forecasts that we can currently make in that second week.
So you're increasing lead time for perhaps big or small weather events and telling us the likelihood of maybe more coastal storms or wind events in some areas?
Those are the kinds of things that that we hope to be able to let Alaskans know in the second week forecast. And if you have an activity or an event that you would find that kind of advance notice useful, whether it's moving stuff off of the beach, whether to go out hunting or to come back from camp, those kind of decisions, the week 2 provides the opportunity for you to get a handle on that kind of information.
Okay. What other type of weather impacts that we're familiar with might Alaskans use climate services for?
Well, in the forecast realm, we can go provide some information from this week 2, say the 8 to 14 day period, on out to the monthly and even seasonal time scale. Now, those monthly seasonal forecasts are still kind of just really very much pattern dependent, and the amount of detail that we can provide at this point is still pretty limited. Generally, indications of how temperature and precipitation will fall in maybe above normal, below normal kind of range. But in the week 2 period, we can be considerably more specific than that as far as the general patterns and really the impacts on Alaskans.
Okay, so we would be talking about generalizations there that would tell us that the period might be more stormy, might be more hot, more dry, more cold, and situations like that.
That's correct. So we're not going to be able to say in which community, for instance, there's the threat of coastal flooding, but we can often be able to tell we're moving into a pattern that would be conducive to big Bering Sea storms. So if you're in an area that could potentially impact you, you'll want to pay attention to the weather forecast.
Okay. Now, every day and every hour of the day, the National Weather Service is working on a forecast for the next day. But how do you start your forecast process for that extended period that goes out beyond 7 days?
Well, the way things work right now, we start off with the expected general flow pattern for Alaska and the whole world, really, and then we narrow that down to Alaska. So we start off with the basic computer model forecast. There's quite a few different computer models that we look at, bring those together. And then another important part of that is we attempt to assess the confidence. The reality is often 2 weeks away, the computer models are very divergent. They have lots of different solutions, and that's an indication that we don't have much confidence. But when we see more agreement in that time frame, and when that agreement is a pattern that will be potentially very impactful for Alaska or is a big change from what we've been in, that's when we can then take that expected pattern. We have computer models forecasting it. We've assessed the confidence. Now we can move that forward. How, using our experience as Alaskan weather forecasters, how does that typically play out for Alaska? So is this a stormy pattern for the Bering Sea? Is this an extra rainy period for Southeast? Is this the kind of pattern that generates strong winds potentially in the Anchorage Bowl? Is this a deep cold pattern for the interior? All of those are the kind of things that we're looking at in these large-scale patterns. That's very different than telling you that the winds on 10 days from now are going to be gusting to 120 on the hillside. We're looking for patterns, not the very specific information that the Weather Service will then hone in on as the event gets closer.
So the idea is to keep the 5, 6, 7 day forecast the same, where you are getting the standard high and low temperature and the chance of wind or rain, but further out you get a broad general forecast, but as the time gets closer to that event, we'll get a lot more specific.
That's correct.
Okay, very good. So how can people use this information if I am out in the bush and I want to see, is a coastal storm expected in my region, or is a chance for that improving over the next 2 to 3 weeks? Where could I go to get information like that?
When we see that potentially impactful or a big change in the weather is coming 8 to 14 days out, typically we will start to highlight that on the Weather Service Facebook site. We might produce a YouTube video highlighting that, linking that on our Facebook site. So often we don't, at this point, we don't have much to say in that because we're really looking for those forecasts of opportunities. But one thing we can say very likely as we go through the next 2 or 3 years, there'll be more and more of this kind of forecast information available in that week 2 time frame.
Okay, and something that emergency managers and city planners and folks in villages might be interested in keeping an eye out for, looking for that information to be headlined, whether that's on social media or perhaps through the National Weather Service channels there to get information from you to make better plans a little bit longer term and make better preparations in the event that things become a little bit more unsettled.
Absolutely. Climate Services with the National Weather Service Alaska region is talking to the state of Alaska every week, apprising them of that 2-week outlook. And on the social media side, we are working to keep Alaskans informed so that when we think we have some confidence in a high impact or a big change, that's the best way right now for folks to find out about that. Twitter, Facebook, so stay tuned to your National Weather Service.
Very good, a developing program. Rick Thoman with the National Weather Service Alaska region. He's a Climate Science and Services Program Manager. Thanks so much for joining us again, Rick, and I hope to have you back again soon.
Great, thanks Dave.
For another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back. Well, southerly winds 30 to 35 there on the south coast. Southeasterly gales for the north coast. Northeast at about 20 there for northern Lynn Canal, turning easterly up to 25 knots for Stevens Passage, and gale force southeasterlies in the forecast for Clarence Strait. Moving on to Monday's outlook, lighter winds east becoming northeast up there along the north coast, only at about 20 knots, northerlies at roughly 20 knots for Lynn Canal. Lighter winds through the central inside waters. Small craft advisories for Clarence Strait with the winds still out of the southeast, and gale force southeast winds beginning to show up again along the south coast with the next system rolling up to the northeast. And for the Prince William Sound area tomorrow, northeast at about 20 knots. Same forecast for northern Cook Inlet, but we've got gales out here for the southern inlet, down across Kamishak Bay with storm warnings out for Shelikof Strait, 50 knots, storm warnings out of the northeast here for the Barren Islands as well, with strong gales from the east side of Kodiak Island right up into the North Gulf Coast. And the outlook for Monday for these areas, still looking at some pretty good gales here along the east side of Kodiak Island, but instead of northeast, southeast winds now, and those diminishing back to small craft advisories for the North Gulf Coast, southeast 20 for Prince William Sound. Out to the west, Bristol Bay, northeast 30 knots with small craft advisories all the way down to Cape Sarachef, and then we've got 40 to 50 knot winds here for the southern portion of the peninsula up to Sitkinak, again with the storm warnings there from Sitkinak to Castle Cape. And for Monday, easterly gales for Bristol Bay. That next system kind of sliding up to the northwest here and weakening, but enough gradient to keep gales there from Sitkinak to Castle Cape. Lighter 20 knot winds for the Alaska Peninsula. And for the eastern Aleutians, variable to northwest, 10 to 20 knots tomorrow, and then southeasterlies 25 to 30 knots for the central Aleutians, becoming east and northeast as you head out to the west. And northeasterlies 20, increasing to 30 knots here as you approach Adak, and then easterly gales there across Adak and Atka, and easterlies all the way back out across the Fox Islands, but dropping off to 20 to 25 knots. And for the southwest coast, east to southeast winds at about 20 tomorrow. Brisk wind advisory, St. Lawrence Island. Light southerlies for the Pribilofs. Monday's outlook, easterly at 20 for the St. Paul, St. George area. Easterlies also from Nunivak Island up to St. Lawrence Island, all at 20 knots. The Arctic coast, brisk wind advisories on the far eastern end there. Otherwise, easterlies at 20 knots, back to 25 for brisk wind advisory for the central coast, and then diminishing as you head on down toward Cape Lisburne there, southeast 15, picking up a little bit down toward the Bering Strait. Easterly winds, pretty general direction here, all along the Arctic coast, 15 to 20 knots for the western coast and the central coast as well, and then brisk wind advisories here for the eastern areas over to Demarcation Point. And looking at tonight's forecast again, a few scattered and isolated snow showers, mostly cloudy here southern Alaska, decreasing snow up here to the north with diminishing winds, dry over the southwest interior, Bristol Bay to the Alaska Peninsula. Here's the next storm rolling up, again bringing the gale force winds and rain into the southern panhandle, moving up to about this position tomorrow afternoon. Right across the Gulf of Alaska, gales and storm force winds with that, and rain changing to showers over the central and southern panhandle. And that next storm out to the west, sliding by to the east, but close enough to give some pretty good winds and at least some rain or precipitation from the eastern Aleutians all the way out to Shimya. Scattered snow showers over the Bering Sea, and then this low weakens, pulls up into Bristol Bay for the gusty winds, rain and snow, Kodiak Island up along the North Gulf Coast. Have a great evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Support comes from the University of Alaska College Savings Plan, helping you and your child save for college every step of the way, from diapers to diploma. More information at uacollegesavings.com.